Hello and welcome to the AgeTech Connect podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Cottmeyer, and today I'm having a conversation with Todd Houghton. Todd is the CEO of Homewatch CareGivers. Homewatch CareGivers offers a wide range of in-home caregiving solutions to help those in need of assistance live happier, safer, and longer in their own homes. Even better, Todd and the folks at Homewatch CareGivers have been longtime friends of the AgeTech Connect community. So much so that Todd will be a featured speaker and Homewatch Caregivers will have a strong presence at the upcoming Home Care and Home Health workshop at the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology on April 24th of this year. So, if you're interested in our conversation today, be sure to attend this workshop to connect with Todd and the great folks at Homewatch Caregivers. All right, and without further ado, Todd, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me today, Daniel. I appreciate this. I'm excited for the upcoming conference and to chat today.
Yeah, excited to get into it. So, today we're going to be talking all about home caregiving. But before we get into the weeds of that, I'm curious, what makes you passionate about working to improve the lives of older adults? You know, the age tech and caregiving spaces are such personal ones. Just about everybody has a connecting story with. I was wondering if you have a connecting story or a personal experience that drives your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I got into the space about 14 years ago, saw aging family members and understanding better the desire and want to live at home as opposed to living in community-based living or institutional-based living. So that's what really started to drive me into it. And then as the years progressed in the space, learning more about loneliness, isolation, keeping people connected, how technology can do that. And more so in the last, I'd say 5 years, really the driving force for me has been behind technology and driving that to make better outcomes for people that want to age at home.
Very nice. So you're kind of looking at it from the whole continuum, like what we used to do and now what we're moving towards, right? So you talked about some of the issues why we need home caregiving, the loneliness, the isolation, the desire to age in place. Can you give a little bit of a background on what home caregiving is and how this need for in-home caregiving arises as a person ages?
Yeah. So home care has been around for many, many, many years, but it's evolved tremendously over the last few years. And so with people having that desire to age at home, they need assistance. And that's where the home care space comes in. Home care traditionally had two verticals, if you will. We've been companion care and personal care.
Okay.
As we've evolved, it's become a bigger continuum of care, right? And so we look on the front side of really what we call active care. Active care is really a tech forward solution for somebody to be connected. And that's where that like looking at isolation and loneliness comes in, keeping them connected. And then as they progress through their aging process, moving through the different phases of what they need. So after you move from personal care, you're really looking at specialized care.
Yeah.
And that focuses on somebody that might have dementia or Parkinson's or any other sort of chronic illness. And then also bringing in the nursing service aspect of things too, to bring that full continuum to wrap around what they need. We've seen tremendous increase in the percent of people that want to age at home.
Yeah.
So we've had to evolve over the years as well. And the other thing I think tying in there is really, we know that there's a supply issue coming up, so not enough caregivers as well. So that's really where that focus on technology comes in too. And then one other component is what we refer to as the solo ager. So we're seeing a tremendous increase in solo agers that have no children to take care of them anymore, but they still want to age at home too. So home care is going to be a key component to all of that as people continue to age.
So you talked about a few of these things, but kind of walk us through the progression of, kind of like you or I just living at home, totally independent. A lot of people don't think of themselves or even like think of their parents as being a person who becomes kind of dependent.
Right.
And I find, in my work, sometimes it can come as a surprise. Like, how does that progress? And then how do you start to address it? So, for instance, if you have somebody, you've talked about aging in place, what would be the other option, right? Do a lot of older adults have to go somewhere, and why do they have to go there? And then how does having a person in a home address that?
Yeah. Lots of good questions there, Daniel. But I think first and foremost, nobody knows they're going to need home care, right? 'Cause
Exactly.
everybody's thinking that at the forefront of being like in your 50s or 60s. And then as you age, you start to realize there's a lot of things you can't do alone, and you're going to need help with that. I think a lot of it surrounds around education. So that aging adult is not ready to admit that they need help or they don't understand what home care is. So it's education. It's also education for what we refer to as the care influencer. It's typically the adult child
Yeah.
that is helping make the decisions because they don't want to admit either that mom or dad are aging or grandparents are aging. And so education is critical to all that. Most people think that their loved one can't live at home, that they're going to have to go to community-based living or institutional living, so independent living, assisted living, even on to skilled living, depending on where they are in their care journey. I think there's a lot of education around those types of places that has to happen for families too, because a family often thinks that if I put mom or dad into independent living, they're going to have 24/7 care.
Yeah.
That's not the case, right? But home care really can bring that one-on-one connective care, and that's why it is a great alternative for someone who can live at home with assistance.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because aging and all the problems that come with aging, it's like everybody knows that they're going to happen and everybody knows that their loved ones and themselves at some point they're going to experience them. But for some reason, we like to brush it under a rug. It's kind of like this ugly truth of being alive that eventually someday we're going to get old and start to have these issues. And I know I personally see a lot of people where they don't make that decision or come to that realization until boom, it hits them all at once. And mom or dad or yourself, oh, I really can't live alone, right? I need this home care, right? So I love that education component of like providing a continuum of home care, right? Like you might only need a little bit of assistance now, but then, you can grade that up and maintain your independence as well as possible if you could tackle it early and just come and demystify the whole experience, right? I'm going to get older. I'm going to need a little bit of assistance. How do I start approaching that systematically?
Absolutely. I think one of the most interesting things is people are aging much differently today than they used to.
Mhm.
And so if I look out to like my great grandma, when she was like
Yeah.
in her 80s, I'm like, well, I'm never going to be like that when I'm in my 80s. I'm going to make sure that I've been much more active leading up to that. So we're in this stigma of not being prepared anymore because we always think we're going to live to be 100 or we're going to live to
Yeah.
be however old we're going to be. And so that's changed a mindset considerably. But we're also conversely more open to having help come into the home than we've ever
Mhm.
been. So I think, we all grew up with some sort of service coming into the home to do something, whether that's a plumber coming in or
Yeah.
somebody coming in to help with care assistance for an older adult that's in our lives, any of those things. So we're more open to that, but we just need to continue to get people prepared, right?
Yeah.
I think the worst conversation that either of us want to have or many people that are out there want to have is telling mom and dad that they need help. And
Yeah.
so when you can start to broach that subject much earlier in life, the better off it's going to be.
It makes the transition a lot easier. And you touched on this, but I'm curious, like, how has home care traditionally been provided? Kind of like leaving the future of home care for a future part of this conversation. How have we usually done it? So you talked about it's changing, right? People aren't having as much kids. People are living longer, right? There's a shortage of caregivers. How have we previously done it? And how have you seen it progress over like the past decade or two?
Yeah. Traditionally, it was two service lines. It was companion care, which really focused on that companionship piece for somebody who might be lonely or isolated, having someone come in and, essentially hanging out with them, like doing some activities and things like that. And then personal care. And personal care was more in the emergent world. Like something happened, mom or dad went to the hospital. They don't need to go to advanced care or post acute. They can go home. And the personal care piece was helping with, bathing and things like that that have to happen as people are aging differently today, it's absolutely evolved into having that full continuum, right? So you can meet them where they are in their care journey through the home care aspect of things. The other piece is that percentage of people that want to age at home continues to increase. We have to look at the longevity of affordability in home care.
Yeah.
And so somebody may not need a care provider in the home 24/7, but that's really where technology comes in. They can stay connected and engaged with their family, with their care providers, with their doctors, their nurses, or friends, whatever it
Mhm.
might be, staying active whether it's through those video connections or they could be playing games or anything like that to stretch the mind and keep them cognitively together as well.
Yeah, it's kinda like what we used to do. If you don't have your kids to help you out, right, you gotta bring somebody into the home,
Right.
right? And having that person there 24/7, you touched on this a bit, but I could just imagine how pricey that gets, right? Having somebody in the home all the time, right? Especially if it hits you all at once and you aren't planning for it and you say, "Oh my gosh, we gotta pay for this person 24/7. How much is that gonna cost me?"
Right.
So, I know a lot of people navigate that traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, it can be very costly, right? And so one of the benchmarks we always use is Genworth puts out an annual statement of what people will spend on average for home care. So the average spend on home care is right around $5,500 a month. In comparison to living in community-based living, like independent living, independent living is averaging about $7,000 a month.
Yeah.
And then you have all the add-ons that go with it. So home care is still the most affordable route that can happen. But you're right, as your needs go up and you have to have, more complex care happening and having somebody in the home more, it can go up and it can go, upwards of $25,000, $30,000 a month to have somebody there 24/7. Planning is critical for that. That's my story all the time. Planning is critical. There's a lot of long-term care benefits out there that people can look at. If they think about it early enough in time, they can get reasonable premiums to build that up and get a lot paid for. There's also, a lot of other opportunities out there for people that may have been in different service sectors in their lives. So, like, if they're a vet, there's a lot of opportunities for vets to get reimbursements from the government for that. Medicare typically pays for a little bit, not a lot, but they pay for a little bit. So there's a lot of options to allow people to get into it first and foremost. And then the world's changed in the fact that it used to be kids were always like, well, we want part of mom and dad's generational wealth, and that would be a house and things like that. We don't see that so much anymore because I think we've all started to build our own generational wealth a little bit earlier in life. And so mom and dad have the opportunity to do like reverse mortgages on the house and things like that that help to afford a home care. But it's all about, they want to live at home. Let's figure it out. Let's get them, the resources they need to be able to live at home.
Because there's a lot of benefits to staying in a home environment, one that's familiar. I know a lot of times when you get older, especially if you start to have mild cognitive impairment or more severe cognitive impairment, moving to a whole new place, changing all of your surroundings, changing the people you interact with can really do a number on your awareness and your orientation to your space, especially if you go into like, dementias and stuff like that. So I could see how important, aging in place and staying in the home is. Now, would a company like Homewatch Caregivers, do you offer that kind of like financial planning or the guidance through that process?
Yeah, so we do what's called care coordination, and that all lumps right into the care coordination aspect of thing to give that guidance from the day that they do outreach to us. They can get some of the resources on our website, absolutely, but
Yeah.
more importantly is like when they contact that local office in their community, they start that process with them. Let's talk about planning. Let's talk about how we can get the resources for you. Let's help you do all that. That carries not only through like that financial planning aspect, but everything else that goes along with it, right? So
Yeah.
if it comes down to a situation on the farther end of the spectrum where mom or dad might have to move, there's help with planning all that and getting them moving too. But circling back to your statement there, living at home is critical, especially when somebody's starting to have cognitive decline, because
Yeah.
that familiarity is critical to enhance the quality of life and keep them there longer. So one of the key things of allowing them to do that is really making sure the house is outfitted too, so they can stay there, right?
You're already starting to touch on some of the key things that make home care giving effective. We've talked about having that care coordinator, right? Somebody that can kind of plan for that whole process and knows the whole arc from beginning to end. Talking about allowing the person to stay at the home, making sure the home is outfitted. What are some other things in your experience with home watch caregivers that really make effective home care?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's the relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's critical because this person that's aging at home, they may or may not have family close by. Most likely they don't. That's why they're getting home care because a family member can't be there to help them. So they need to trust that person that's coming in to the home. And then that helps elevate the whole process of things. Beyond that, it's connection all the time and making sure that the care coordinators are having that ongoing connection with the patient or client, depending on the situation that they're in, to make them stay comfortable and being aware of a changing condition and things like that, so that can help them stay much longer at home.
That's a really interesting thing because I think a lot of times, I come from a science background, a healthcare background. We like to view kind of like the older adult, or if you're in a scientific paper, you say, the subject, it's separate from the human being.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you got to think, I'm putting another person to live sometimes 24/7 with mom and dad, right? With my loved one.
Right.
And to an extent, right? Beyond all of the clinical needs, the health needs, the safety needs, I don't wanna hang out with somebody I don't like, right? I don't wanna hang out with somebody I don't trust, right?
Exactly.
So how do you guys at Homewatch Caregivers navigate that kinda tricky, it's you almost have to imagine it's like a matchmaking thing, right?
Spot on.
Yeah.
It is. So all of our software does essentially matchmaking.
It's like
Right.
harmony.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And we get all of the environmental pieces around the client patient. We get all of their likes, their dislikes, things that make them happy. what they want to do in their free time, the games they like, whatever it is. We put all that into our matching software, and it matches with the caregiver. And then we do a lot of introductions, right? We go out and do introductions just to make sure that it's a comfortable situation. I'd say we have about a 90% match rate. So it is pretty good, right? But we also really make sure that people know that they have a care team. So it's not just that caregiver. In the event that caregiver should get sick or not be able to come or whatever it might be, we want to make sure that we can plug somebody else in right behind it to provide that same level of care and experience. It's definitely a process.
Yeah,
For sure.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about that process, even if you kind of do everything right, right? You get the good match, you get the financials settled in, you kind of know the whole arc of the process. What are some of the limitations of the traditional approach? What's hard and kind of insurmountable about that in-person caregiving delivery?
I think, well, the one thing is we look at somebody who's aging, their conditions can change day to day.
Yeah.
And so that can affect the delivery of care from one day to the next. If you're dealing with somebody who's in a cognitive decline, if you're not well trained for it, then you may be up against something that you're not expecting, and that
Yeah.
can affect the delivery of care as well. I know for us, we're very aligned with making sure that people that are going into the home are trained in the diagnoses that somebody has in the home. So focusing on cognitive decline and dementia, like only people that are dementia certified are going into a home with somebody that has dementia, which is very important
Yeah.
for them to live with dignity and safely in the home as well.
One thing I've found is that you see these diagnoses represented on TV, or maybe you have a family member who you go, oh, they had a similar diagnosis. And so, you think that, oh, well, I know what this is, I can handle it. But until you have like a really robust understanding of how it varies from person to person and how these disease states present, it can be really difficult dealing with a loved one who's having one of those states of cognitive or physical decline,
Right.
right? Without the appropriate experience.
Absolutely is. And I think one of the other big struggles too is family members don't often recognize that,
Yeah.
or they don't want to admit it, right? And so having the outside set of eyes is
Yeah.
probably pretty helpful as well. I think the other thing is making sure that like a care plan review is done every 30 days with the family, unless there's a change in condition in a shorter window of time. That helps really make sure the right person is there delivering the care every day as well. Because what happens today with somebody is going to be totally different 30 days from now, especially if they're in their late 70s, 80s. We really want to make sure that we're focused on that as well.
Do you find that your caregivers are able to stay with the person throughout their entire caregiving journey? What's the duration for one caregiver per care receiver?
It really depends on the
Yeah.
client. It really does. Like it depends on their conditions and how quickly their conditions change. We have some caregivers that have been out there for 10, 15 years with a client
Oh, yeah.
living at home and the same caregiver, right? And so that caregiver really becomes part of the family and his family, and they can evolve and learn and make sure that they're providing the appropriate care for that person at the age. You'll have others that you maybe a home health aide or a caregiver, and then the conditions may escalate, their acuity changes. So they now need like maybe a CNA or somebody who has a licensed credential behind them to be giving the care. So it just depends on the condition of the client patient that and what's happening with them.
Yeah. What I want to touch on is something that you brought up earlier was this kind of this scarcity of available caregivers. Because up until this point, we talked about the limitations of the model, assuming that we actually have the caregivers to provide the care. But what's kind of evolving in these current trends that are leading to, oh, even if we do everything right, we might not even have that caregiver to provide it, even if we wanted to, even if we have the resources, right?
Right.
Even if we have the plan.
Right.
What's going on in that,
Well,
that space?
you think about we still have about 10,000 people turning 65 every day. And
Yeah.
that's going to continue through about 2034. We'll see like the peak of the
Okay.
baby boomers being 65 and older at that point. We predict that there's in the healthcare realm of things over the next 5 years, about 2 million shortage on care providers. So that could be anything from caregiver all the way through a license like RN type of
Yeah.
thing. So we all have to be aware of that. And what are we going to do to help with that supply? Because demand is not going to change. Demand just keeps going up
Yeah.
for services, right? One of the things that we have to look at is how do we supplement that caregiver in the home to allow the aging adult to continue to live at home. I
Yeah.
think that's really where technology is going to come in, connection, engagement, however we're going to do that with the client or patient to keep them safe and secure at home.
So that's where I want to go into next. I mean, again, given that caregiving is facing so many barriers, and like we talked about, these barriers and limitations are probably just going to keep getting worse, right? As we get more and more older folks and less younger folks, right? We get this top heavy population. It's going to become more of a thing, right? So, how do you see technology reshaping the caregiving industry?
Yeah, I think there's several components to it. I think the biggest thing is technology can help with the connection and the engagement that that person has in their home, right? And it has to be in a platform or format that's easy for them to use, not confusing if they're having cognitive decline, and accessible in a 24/7 fashion. One of the things that we've done to escalate that is really do some research and understand, what is somebody comfortable with at many different levels of aging.
Yeah.
And so you have to get used to that. People that are, approaching 90 today have far more apprehension to technology than people that will be turning 90 in the next 5 years.
Oh, for
And,
sure.
and so, people are much more connected and used to it. As we did this research, we had a lot of findings, we had a lot of learnings about what was going to work. We use what's called our wellness hub, and it connects
Okay.
through the TV. And the wellness hub, it's safe, secure. A family minister is the only one that can say who can be a part of it, but it allows that person living in the home to connect to the TV with a provider, a loved one, family member, whatever, friend, whenever they want. Right, and it also allows for things like med reminders. We know that medication management is one of the most critical things to living at home. So med reminders can be done through either a virtual connection or they can be done sort of like the news feed scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Daniel, it's time to take your medicine, right?
Yeah.
As a scroll across there. Or if we have nutrition issues, like those things can come up and scroll across the TV, reminders to, hydrate or eat or whatever it might be. So things like that can help supplement when a caregiver is not in the home are
Yeah.
gonna be critical in the aging process as we move forward. Other things that happen there too is really the Bluetooth capability. So now you can connect devices, right? So
Yeah.
you have the ability to connect a scale, you can connect a blood pressure cuff, whatever it might be. And so like a provider can get instant information from their patient that's in the home through this wellness hub, checking on them, making sure their vitals are good. Our nurses at our offices do the same thing. And then as we evolve into that, it's bringing in AI too, and a lot of AI options that can help enhance the experience of living at home. And so we see that growing. We do a lot of things with AI. First and foremost is in helping develop the care plans. So if they're person centered, we started touching on that and I meant to
Yeah.
mention that, but really making sure the care plan's person centered. Home care in the traditional way used to be, go in and just do the assessment, but it's just checklist of like, okay, we should probably come 4 days a week for 5 hours with no real rhyme or reason of
Yeah.
what we were doing in that. And I say that because if you go out and look at all the research, the amount of hours that somebody is in the home is 20 hours a week. And if you dive a little bit deeper, only 50% of that is direct care.
Yeah.
So you can enhance the efficiencies of caregivers, like we are talking about, but you can enhance the experience for the client and make sure that that care plan is person centered. And AI helps with that as well in the intake process. AI continues to play a big role after the client patient's in service. AI is used for a lot of that outbound calling that calls to do med reminders, that calls to do nutrition reminders. The client patient has no inference that it's not a human calling them because
Yeah.
the platforms are that great now that they can do that. But with AI, you can call tens of thousands of people in an instant as opposed to a care coordinator or a nurse trying to call multiple people, right? The neat thing with those AI components too is that it is tracking and recording cognitive abilities. And so you might have a conversation today with the outbound AI call source, and she or he may call you back in a week, and it's having conversations based on the previous week's conversation and scoring, like your memory or whatever might be happening to help identify the level of care needs to be escalated as well. So I turn into a little bit of a geek on some of this, but
Yeah.
it's exciting the direction that it's going to do a lot of things we've been talking about, right? It enhances the care. It helps with caregiver efficiencies. It's going to keep that person at home much longer,
Yeah.
and then keep them connected and engaged.
So I want to kind of break down what I'm hearing. So there's kind of like three components that are going to be, in your opinion, the big things coming up, right? Things that are able to enhance connectivity and engagement, things that are able to provide better monitoring in the home, and then AI elements. And all three of those things are going to do kind of one or two things: make the caregiver more effective and or improve the patient experience. So I want to come back because one thing I really like, especially when we're having technology conversations, is, to remind everybody, and you touched on this beautifully, that the ultimate purpose of technology is to enhance the human connectivity. A lot of people have this bias that if we introduce the technology, it's going to make the whole interaction less human, without considering the fact that you can actually improve the human element of these individuals' lives through technology. Can you talk about how HomeWatch Caregivers and the hub that you're creating enhances connectivity?
Right. So yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, technology is not replacing the human element, right? It is enhancing the human element. It's making better connectivity, social engagement for the people that are getting care. When we set out to really bring technology into the experience of point of care, that was critical. Historically, if you had somebody that was in the home to do a visit for 4 hours a day, what's happening the other 20 hours of the day?
Yeah.
So technology is that piece that's going to help with that. Being able to call a nurse on demand
Yeah.
through the platform is critical, right? If the caregiver's not there, there's just so many things that it can do. It enhances cognitive awareness because you're staying connected. You can play a game, or you can listen to music, or you can look at photos like through the technology platform. And then as we're looking at that whole ecosystem of that, it is also about data collection on the other side of things, right?
Yeah.
So data is also critical to outcomes.
I want to get into kind of how we're going to aggregate all this data and, where we see AI coming into that. But to touch on the second point, so you talk about enhancing the connectivity where the person in the home can reach out to family members, can reach out to caregivers. They have that hub where they can reach outside of their home to access the resources they need. How about that kind of passive monitoring that you talked about via Bluetooth connections and via home sensors? Again, a lot of people kind of have this bias of, well, that feels invasive. You're watching me the whole time, but it's not actually like that when you implement it. Can you speak a little bit more?
Not
Yeah.
not at all, right? And so let's start with the sensor back too, because there are sensors that go in the home that are really looking at ambient temperature,
Yeah.
looking at fall risks or fall prevention. Also, like there's sensors that might be in the hallway that identify like, hey, mom went to the bathroom like many times last night. She may have a UTI or something like that. So there's opportunities to track those types of things and look at that. Completely non-invasive. Nobody's watching. It's just a computer generated report that comes out the next day that people see. On the wellness hubs that go on the TV, it's basically like using your phone, right? The client or patient living at home decides when to accept and not accept calls that are coming in. It's not watching in any way, fashion, shape, or form, or recording or anything like that. In our world, there's only one person that can override the shutter on the camera, and that's the family administrator. And that allows for a wellness check. If mom or dad aren't answering, they can override it to look. But privacy is the top priority. Security is critically important. Being HIPAA compliant, everything that goes along the healthcare spectrum is what's followed with all those pieces.
You probably know this, but whether you're the person who's trying to age in home or whether you're the child or the primary caregiver or the primary point of contact, if you don't have, especially if you're living alone, if you don't kind of have a second pair of eyes or something to kind of keep track with the outside world, things can go awry really quickly, right? All of a sudden you're in the bathroom, you fall, you break a hip, right? I mean, people could pass away doing that, right? But there's stories of people for days, having to lay on the bathroom floor because nobody checked on them. Nobody knew what was going on. I don't usually call mom every day, so I haven't heard from her 3 days, but that's normal. I liked how you brought up things that most people wouldn't think about, like UTIs, right? Like something to just monitor how many times the toilet flushes, right? The toilet hasn't flushed in 2 days, that might be an issue, right?
Right.
Ambient temperature monitoring or just like the hallway monitors to see how many times does mom or dad pass through the hallway, right? If you're not getting any motion in the last, 24 hours, 48 hours, that could be an issue. So it's those kind of sensors rather than, having a camera up
Right.
there.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the camera's not going to give you results, right? Yeah. When you have these non-invasive sensors that are doing it, it's going to change lives. I share an example because this just happened a few weeks ago, but a lady living at home, hypertension, and a sensor identified that the space was 92 degrees. And so they caught it early on. Had she been at home any longer than she was, she probably would have had worse conditions
Like a
happen to her.
hypertensive
Yes,
emergency.
but she got to the hospital and everything turned out fine, right? One example of many stories that happen, all the time with the ability to have that passive monitoring, if you will, going on. It's come so far, in the last 5 years, and it's only going to continue to elevate what we can do with monitoring and staying in the home. Definitely not a camera watching that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We touched on data, and I want to come back to it because as we start to monitor and as we can get all these different points of contacts in the home, be it the human element or the technology element, we start to generate a lot of data. And then, especially combined with AI these days, can start to have a pretty good predictive capacity and diagnostic capacity. So, where do you see kind of this data management edge coming into home care? Because we're at a point where we almost have too much data and don't know what to do with it, right?
Fair statement. Yeah, and you have to decide how you're going to use the data, right? I think one of the critical components is being proactive rather than reactive in the data that you're monitoring. And so if you see a change in conditions for like 30 minutes and maybe heart rate or something, like don't overreact. You got to look at the trend over the last several hours. And that's really where we focus is like, we're looking at trends, right? If we see interesting things happening, we're like, oh, this could be hospitalization on its way, just based on some of the data points. And we want to prevent that hospitalization. So based on data points, we'll take them to the doctor, things like that. That can help stay safer. Data is also critical on the outcome side of things, right? And so we want to make sure that we can take those data points and talk with providers and we refer to as referral sources, right? Really the hospitals and things like
Yeah.
that. How we're a better partner with keeping mom out of the hospital. I think looking at all that, both the data that we've been tracking for almost 2 years now, and then the technology that we put in, we've seen about a 33% reduction in ER visits,
Oh, wow.
which is huge, right? I mean, it's still not good enough, but it's only getting better, right?
Mhm. It's a better trend for sure. And again, it's like that data is no matter how good your doctor is, right? They don't have eyes in your home, right? So we can bring that data to them, the medication data, the falls data, the balance data, the blood pressure data, all those things.
Absolutely.
It makes just a monumental difference in your ability to provide healthcare.
Right.
And then kind of bouncing off that data or the big data aspect, how do you see, AI playing into the data processing? I know you talked about AI solutions as in like, providing calls and collecting information. How do you see that playing into the data collection and the data processing aspect?
I mean, AI is going to play some big components in that, right? I think one is it'll be able to analyze data much faster for us than the human eye. That's going to be the big test. And we can get different benchmarks throughout the day or throughout a couple days, whatever it might be, much, much quicker in analyzing all of that. And it also is through connectivity. So we may be gathering the data in the home, but AI is going to help push that data out to a provider or a doctor and be able to perhaps prescribe faster,
Yeah.
right, if necessary. And in the human world of things, we don't have enough fingers on our hands. We don't have enough time in our day to track every single patient that's in care or client that's in care. And so AI is really going to help escalate all of that.
Yeah, I got a fun one for you bouncing off of AI. So I feel like, coming out with the Optimus robots, it seems like in-home robotics is a topic of conversation. And we just at AgeTech Connect had a big meetup about that in the Atlanta community. So do you see robotics replacing in-home caregivers anytime soon? Is that on your radar?
I love that question because I've been asked that question for 10
Yeah,
years, right?
I bet.
And probably 10 years ago, I said, yeah, maybe in like 5 years, we'll see a little bit more. And here we are, like, 10 years later. And I'm like, yeah, probably another, like, time down the road. I think, there'll be some opportunity for some things to come in the home, but it
Yeah.
will never replace that human element. You still need that human element. If we, look at the Jetsons, like it was a real thing, they predicted it happening. And I think it could happen someday. I just don't see it in the near future for robotics to doing the provision of care. Robotics for like connection and engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's already out there, right? We see people that have robotic dogs,
Yeah.
that help with things. We see people that have robotic dolls to have interaction and connection with. So those things are there. It's just about adoption. And if we look at the aging population, people today that are probably like in their 80s and older, it took them a long time to want to sit down and use an iPad or use a laptop or use a smartphone. They're more likely to be using it now, but that took a while for adoption. So the same is going to be with any sort of like non-human element coming into the home.
I bet it's gonna be a tougher adoption gap for sure.
Yeah.
You talk about the Jetsons. I feel like I grew up in the generation of, like iRobot and stuff like that.
Right.
All the dystopian robot stuff. So, I think there's some nerves around it, but also it could be a reality in the next, 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're able to create it, I don't know how long ago Jetsons was on. It's probably, 40 years ago. But you think about, we were able to create it back then with Vision, and then fast forward to iRobot and other things that have been out there.
Yeah.
We've been able to create it for movies and things like that. We're creating it. It's going to be there at some point in time, but I just don't think we're ready in the short term.
Yeah. We'll stick with the monitoring technology and the connectivity, all the stuff we already talked about. But it's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to home caregiving. So obviously, all this technology is having great strides to improve healthcare and whatnot. But as kind of like an executive higher up in a home caregiving company, I'm sure you interact with a lot of people trying to, get you to use their new technology, get you to use their next big thing. What do you look for when you're trying to implement the technology into your home caregiving company or into your home caregiving solution? Or maybe in other words, like what are some do's and don'ts if you're going to talk to the innovators out there?
Right, right. I think, from my seat, I am very much an innovator, so I want to be on the leading
Yeah.
edge, right? That's important to me, and that's what you evaluate a partner that can actually help you get to where you want to get and get the outcomes that you want to get. You have a lot of new innovators out there that want to bring something to market, and if you can, from my seat, if you can present to me well and tell me what the outcomes are going to be, I'll entertain it and look at it, and I think that's what helps getting the right technology in there. And I think when we started this journey 5 years ago of looking for technology, I met with some things that were already out there and a lot of big companies that were trying to be in this space. And I really had that gut feeling that they weren't doing what we wanted to try to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so as we look deeper into new innovators out there and trying to understand how we can work together to give the best experience, but also hit the other points, right? Make it non-invasive, make it data driven that we can get the right data points. Those are the critical pieces out there. We all can think of immediately on top of our head the solutions that you could put in your own that you think is going to keep mom or dad connected in a good fashion. And we can all have our opinions on that. But I think you have to really come down to making sure that the solution is right for somebody who's aging at home and not for the greater population who can function every day in a normal.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a disconnect between what innovators think will work and what will actually work for older adults?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you recommend to an innovator who wants to get that fit right? Because I'm sure if you're creating a solution, you put all this work into it, you don't want to find out that it doesn't actually work for the population you're
Right.
going for. How can they get that experience?
Focus groups. I mean, that's getting right. That's what we did when we started our initial journey, right? We two different types of focus groups. We had what we call the end user, that client patient, and really understanding what would keep them connected, engaged, and utilizing it, and what was important to them. And then what we refer to as the care influencers or the adult child,
Yeah.
like what do they want? Interestingly enough, the biggest obstacle in the journey is really that individual, the curiosity. They'll often say like, mom or dad don't want technology in the home. They don't want that. And finding out that they really did, they're the ones that
Yeah.
want to be connected. But those focus groups help surface that information, right? There's just tremendous amount of opportunity to continue to enhance what we do. We're in a world of that non-invasive or passive growth in the technology space to help people age is critical. I'm still a firm believer that wearables are great, but you have to wear the wearable.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges, right? I think we have to realize that the 80-year-old that might be having cognitive decline is not going to wear the wearable. And when you ask them if they're wearing the wearable, they're going to talk to you like they're a child because they're going through that in their life, and you're not going to get them to wear it. So you're not going to get the data, or you're not going to be able to observe what's going on. So I know it's just there's so much more opportunity to continue to grow solutions and doing it the right way.
Yeah, and you kind of touched more on the aspects of, the efficacy for the aging adult or the care influencer, as you say. But one thing I know that a lot of innovators run into is kind of who's going to pay for it, right? And we'd all like to think that, the only mission is, addressing the needs of the older adult. And that should be at the peak, right? But at the end of the day, right, if you're a business, you at some point somebody's got to buy your product. Do you find that there's a lot of mismatch in the home care community between people who create products that are maybe good for the individual, but don't have an appropriate payer?
Yes, there is, but the way that we try to overcome that in my space, in my world, is really talking about the need for it, the importance for it, and
Yeah.
then bundling it into the service that's being offered, right? And so in the private pay space, that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
We can bundle in, we talk about the outcomes that are going to happen and connection that's going to happen and family members get it, right? when you're working with other payer sources, third-party payer sources, it does become a little more challenging to get them to understand. And so one of the things that we're working on is building those relationships with those third-party payer sources. The big ones is the VA. And everybody who's served, regardless of what branch they served in or when they served, as long as they were serving during the time of an active war, they get a benefit. And we've been working diligently with the VA over the last year and a half to get them to understand the importance of technology and pay for it. And it's perfect timing because today there's a big meeting going on to give that approval for technology to the IRS. And so I've got some people there at the meeting this afternoon. Yes, I'm just fingers crossed. Like, I hope that goes because they get this amazing benefit. But just think like how much technology could enhance that or change that or provide better outcomes or keep them out of the hospital for an affordable fashion to the VA. So, and there's many more opportunities with that we're working on with other payer sources to get them to understand, look, technology is an affordable piece to keep somebody at home safe. And, if we look at somebody has to go to the hospital, they walk into the ER, it's costing somebody about $10,000 for them just to walk in the door. And technology can keep somebody at home for a couple $100 a month.
And when you frame it that way, it really becomes a no-brainer, right? You're saving thousands of dollars in some cases. So I think a lot of payers say, well, I don't want to pay the extra money. It's like, no, this is going to save you money in the long term.
Yeah.
So if you're speaking to, the innovators out there, right? If you're talking to everybody watching, and somebody's wanting to come up with a great idea or they're looking for, some fodder to get creative, what would you say? Like, is there anything that a home watch caregiver you just thought, man, if we had this would really make our jobs a lot easier?
Yeah. Again, it's being innovative and creating something that can be passive and making the experience for somebody aging at home much better than it is today. And technology, obviously, we know changes every minute. It's changed dramatically in the time we've been sitting here. So looking out and be forward thinking on what you want to develop or what you think is going to be the best thing. Test it again, fix it. It's not going to be right the first time. I know that. I've watched many yeses come to market, but also don't give up because the best new thing is not out there yet. And we got to continue to find out what that is.
Well, perfect. That's a great place to end it. We're running right up against our time. Todd, it was really great talking with you. For anyone watching who's interested in getting connected with you or learning more about Home Watch caregivers, how can they do that? How can they get connected with you and follow what you guys are doing?
Yeah, they can feel free to email me. My email address is THOUGHTON at homewatch-intl.com.
We could probably put that in the description or something like that, unless you want to write it all down.
That's the best way to get a hold of me. And, I'm very passionate about sharing what we do, but very much passionate about sharing like where we need to go with AgeTech and what we need to do to allow people to age at home in a safer fashion.
And that passion comes across very clearly. So I appreciate you sitting down to talk with me. Don't forget to hear more from Todd and Home Watch Caregivers at the AgeTech Connect Home Care and Home Health Workshop hosted at the beautiful USC campus in Los Angeles, California. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Todd, for being here, and we'll see you next time.